So the three witnesses of the Book of Mormon faced persecution, trials of their faith, and even risked losing their own lives, but they never denied what they saw. So in this video, I'm going to review the stories of Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmore, and Martin Harris. We're going to begin with Martin Harris. He was a prosperous man in Whitmore, New York. He built a pretty comfortable life for himself. He had this huge farm, a nice house. He was married to Lucy Harris. His life changed forever when he heard about a young boy named Joseph Smith, who was more than 20 years younger than him, that had received angelic visitations. And to his surprise, that young boy's mother, Lucy Smith, stopped by the Harris's home with some intriguing news. She told him that Joseph Smith had actually received these golden plates and was asked to translate them, and he was having difficulty finding the time to translate them as well as protect them from thieves. The Smiths didn't have a lot of money to help assist in the translation process or to help with the publication of the book that would come, but they knew that the Harrises did, and so she asked Martin if he'd be willing to come meet with her son. At first, Lucy Mack was like super on board, and she even volunteered to financially help with the translation of the Book of Mormon. However, Martin was a little hesitant at first. He even grabbed Joseph's arm at one point and said, "If it is the devil's work, I will have nothing to do with it." Joseph wasn't able to show Martin the plates, but he did let Martin lift the box the plates were in. Martin could tell something was heavy in there, but he told Joseph, "Don't blame me if I don't take you for your word." Because some of the persecutions in the area were increasing, Joseph did move to Harmony with his pregnant wife, Emma. When Joseph was preparing to move to Harmony, Martin met with him and gave him $50 in silver and said, "I give this to you to do the Lord's work." Martin wanted some kind of physical proof that the work that Joseph was doing was real. He asked if Joseph could write down some of the characters found in the plates and then translate them, and then he could take that piece of paper to some professors in ancient history to see if they could authenticate the work. Martin took them all the way up to Charles Anthon, who was a young professor in grammar and linguistics at Columbia College. And Anthon didn't know the Egyptian language, but he had done some studies on the language and knew what it looked like. So when he looked at the characters that Martin brought him, he saw a lot of similarities with Egyptian and told Martin the translation was correct. Martin showed him additional characters, and Anthon said that they looked similar to various different languages, and he wrote a certificate saying that they were true characters. Martin took the certificate, and just as he was leaving, Anthon called out to him and then asked him how Joseph had found these ancient records. Martin told him that an angel had revealed it to him and that he himself was going to mortgage his home to help the publication of this book. Anthon asked to see the certificate one more time. As Martin gave it back to him, Anthon tore it up and said there's no such thing as ministering angels. He told Martin that if he wanted the rest of the plates translated, that he should bring them to him and that he would have a scholar translate the rest. But Martin told him that he could not bring anything to him because the book was sealed and Joseph didn't have permission to show him to anyone, to which Anthon said, "I cannot read a sealed book." Many have come to look at that phrase stated by Anthon as the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, "Read this, I pray thee." And he saith, "I cannot, for it is sealed." Martin Harris did come back, and he was fully committed to help Joseph in translating the Book of Mormon and in getting it published. However, he still had some doubts. One time he was near a river and he found a rock that looked super similar to a seer stone, almost identical to the one Joseph was using to help assist in the translation. He switched the two stones on Joseph to see if he would notice. When Joseph was unable to continue translating, Martin told him what his trick was and apologized. Martin didn't just face challenges from the community, but he also faced challenges with his wife. She kept insisting that he shouldn't spend more time helping Joseph translate the Book of Mormon. Martin asked Joseph if he could bring home a transcript to her to show her, and it was denied. Martin insisted he ask again. Joseph did ask again, and the Lord denied him again. Martin insisted that he really needed to show some kind of proof to his wife that the work they were doing was true. Joseph asked one more time of the Lord, and on this third time, the Lord allowed certain conditions that he could show the translated plates to only his wife, parents, brother, and sister-in-law. As soon as Martin left, the angel Moroni actually appeared to Joseph and took the interpreters from him. And the day after Martin's departure, Emma endured an agonizing labor. She gave birth to a boy, but the baby was frail and sickly and didn't live long. This left Emma physically drained and emotionally devastated. For a time, it seemed like she might die too, so Joseph stayed by her constantly, never leaving her side. But after a couple of weeks, she insisted that Joseph go. She said something just isn't right. And although Joseph was hesitant to leave his wife, he made a 130-mile trip back to his parents' home to see Martin and what had happened to the transcribed pages. The Smiths prepared breakfast, and it was ready by 8 a.m. They went to Martin's house to ask him to come join, but he showed up 4 hours late. He slowly walked towards the home. He hesitated by the fence. Finally, he came in. He picked up his utensils as if he was going to eat, but then he confessed that he had lost the manuscript. This was a devastating blow for Joseph Smith, who believed all was lost. Once Joseph arrived home, the angel Moroni appeared to him again and took the plates away. "If you are sufficiently humble," he said, "and penitent, you shall receive them again." When the angel Moroni appeared to him again, he handed him the interpreters and the plates and said, "The works and designs and the purposes of God cannot be frustrated, neither can they come to naught. You should not have feared man more than God. Repent of which thou hast done, and thou art still chosen." And it's at this point in our story that we come to meet Oliver Cowdery. Before Oliver was 3 years old, his mother passed away, and he was passed from one family to another, but he attended school regularly and he became really good at writing and language. He later got a job as a school teacher and boarded at the Smiths' home. Eventually, the Smiths came to trust Oliver and they told him about the work their son was doing. Oliver went to prayer to ask the Lord if this story was true and if the work Joseph was doing was of God. The Lord showed him a vision and he saw the golden plates and Joseph's efforts to translate them, and a peaceful feeling came over him, and he knew that he should volunteer to be Joseph's scribe. So as soon as the school year wrapped up, he asked Joseph's brother Samuel to trek with him for 3 days in the spring to Joseph's home. When they arrived and got introduced to Joseph Smith, Joseph said, "Oliver, I've been expecting you." Joseph had been praying for a new scribe to help assist him in translating the plates. The translation process was miraculous, but Oliver still wanted some reassurance. He went to Joseph and asked him if he could receive a revelation from the Lord for him. The Lord declared through Joseph, "Verily, verily, I say unto you, if you desire a further witness, cast your mind upon the night that you cried unto me in your heart, that you might know concerning the truth of these things. Did I not speak to your mind? What greater witness can you have than from God? Look unto me in every thought, doubt not, fear not." Oliver didn't tell Joseph what his experience was. He hadn't told anyone, so he knew that this revelation came from the Lord. As they continued translating the Book of Mormon, they saw many wonderful truths being taught. As they came across the section about baptism in 3rd Nephi, which talks about the authority to baptize, they wondered, where's that authority on the earth today? Who has it? Or how did they get it? As they went to pray about it, John the Baptist appeared and restored the authority to baptize. Later, Peter, James, and John appeared and restored the Melchizedek priesthood. Oliver said of these times, "These were days never to be forgotten, days of harmony, days of gratitude, days of hope." However, persecutions did continue to arise, as a lot of Amos family members insisted that they see the plates or else. Oliver had a friend named David Whitmore, and so he sent him a letter asking if he and Joseph could go to the Whitmore farm to continue translating the plates there in peace. It wasn't a decision he could make on his own. It was a family farm, and so all of his brothers and sisters and his parents had lots of chores to do. As he went to his family and asked if they could come here, it was a little stressful. Why did they have to come to the Whitmore farm? Why couldn't they go somewhere else? Could they really handle 2 more mouths to feed? As David asked his father if he could go and get Oliver and Joseph, his father responded that he had a lot of plowing and work to do, and that he had better to get his chores done first. David prayed to do his work faster than he had ever done it before so he could have time to go and get Joseph and Oliver. But the work went terribly slowly. He felt a little discouraged that the work hadn't gone any quicker. But then something miraculous happened. He got up the next morning and he saw between 5 and 7 acres of his ground had been plowed during the night. He didn't know who did it, but it was done. And it was done just as well as he would have done himself. When his father saw that that work had been done miraculously, he told him to go and get Joseph and his scribe and bring them there. Martin Harris, Oliver Cowdery, and David Whitmore all expressed desires to see the plates and stand as witnesses. Joseph was instructed by the Lord that there would be 3 witnesses chosen to see the plates, and these 3 were chosen. As they knelt down to pray, at first the heavens were quiet. There was no answer to the prayer. But Martin Harris got up and said, "It's because of me," and he left. After Martin left, the angel Moroni appeared to David Whitmore and Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith and showed them the plates. After this wonderful experience, Joseph went and found Martin alone praying. As Joseph knelt down beside him to pray as well, the angel appeared again, this time to Martin. Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith finished translating the Book of Mormon in 65 or fewer working days. Martin committed himself to the publication. Essentially, he would have to impart of all of his property, which he had a legal right to get the Book of Mormon published. His Doctrine and Covenants 19 revealed to Martin, "Thou shalt not cover thy own property, but impart of it freely to the prince of the Book of Mormon." Martin mortgaged his farm as payment for the publication. His neighbors were amazed that this sensible friend would abandon one of the best farms in the neighborhood to underwrite the publication of a book. Martin initially hoped that he could redeem the mortgaged farm by selling copies of the Book of Mormon, but the Lord revealed to him another way to get out of debt: to sell his property and release himself from bondage. Martin was hesitant to do this. One day Joseph found him really distraught, as Martin said, "Nobody wants to buy this book. I need a new commandment, a new revelation." Joseph told him to fulfill the revelation he had gotten. Martin wasn't given a new revelation, and he finally did sell enough property to pay off his debt. This secured him as a spot as the most significant financial supporter of the Book of Mormon. Martin was later commanded to be an example unto the church in laying his monies before the bishop of the church, thus becoming the first man the Lord called by name to consecrate his property in Zion. Martin also served missions, and he joined the 900-mile trek with Zion's camp. David Whitmore was also continuing faithful in the church. He went to Jackson County, Missouri, where he became the presiding officer of the church in Missouri. As mobs came, they grabbed David Whitmore and other leaders and they forced him into the town square and held him at gunpoint. The mob's leader threatened his prisoners with instant death unless they denied the Book of Mormon and confessed it to be a fraud. The clicks of guns being cocked backed up his ultimatum. David Whitmore raised his hands and bore his witness of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. The Spirit was so strong as he spoke that the mob lowered their guns, shook before him, and were unable to remain in his presence. They let him go. Later, when the saints were forcibly driven out of their homes in the fall of 1833, David was among those who lost nearly all of his earthly possessions. Oliver Cowdery served as the second elder, the assistant president of the church, and as the assistant counselor to the first presidency. He helped Joseph Smith prepare revelations for the Book of Commandments and later the Doctrine and Covenants. He witnessed miracles in the Kirtland Temple, was a stalwart, faithful member of the church for a time. A financial crisis hit, including the failure of the Kirtland Safety Society Bank, started by Joseph Smith. There was a discord and financial troubles in the Quorum of the 12, and there were lots of other trials that caused many to waver in their faith. Shortly after Martin's wife died, and during all of these other trials, he said that he lost confidence in Joseph Smith and his mind became darkened. Martin began associating himself with other dissenters in the church and was excommunicated in December 1837. Oliver Cowdery, who had faced tons of financial troubles during this time, stopped consecrating his property and instead sought after his own endeavors. Oliver claimed that church leaders were mismanaging funds, and he spread rumors about Joseph Smith committing adultery. Joseph Smith had once said that he ordained David Whitmore to be a leader or a prophet to this church, which ordination was on the conditions that he, Joseph Smith Jr., did not live to God himself. So in the case of Joseph Smith no longer following God, supposedly David Whitmore should take his place. Thus, when the Kirtland Safety Society failed in 1837, some people came to the conclusion that Joseph was a fallen prophet, who was no longer living according to God's direction, and that David Whitmore should take the reins of leadership. That's where we get this awesome scene with Brigham Young, who showed up to one of these meetings where they were trying to make David Whitmore the president of the church.
We formally denounce the leadership of Joseph Smith.
Hear, hear!
And declare him a fallen
Joseph
prophet.
Smith is the prophet of the church, and thereby its leader. I know it. You know it. Rail and slander him as you will, but you cannot destroy the appointment of the prophet of God.
Now, Brigham, we're gonna overrule you. David Whitmer is the man to lead us now.
You can only destroy your own authority. Cut the thread that binds you to the prophet of God, and sink yourselves to hell.
Brigham reminded them that Joseph was still the prophet of the church, and that they could only destroy their own authority by dissenting. David Whitmore's and Joseph's relationship continued to get more strained. David was asked to appear before the Missouri High Council in Far West to answer charges given against him. David was accused of several offenses, particularly not observing the word of wisdom, not attending church meetings, unchristlike conduct, uniting with and possessing the same spirit with the dissenters, writing letters with dissenters, speaking bad about Joseph Smith, neglecting the duties of his calling, and once signing himself as the president of the Church of Christ in an insulting letter to the High Council. David refused to answer to any of these charges against him in person or otherwise. He said, "To spare you any further trouble, I hereby withdraw from you your fellowship and communion." So just like that, the three witnesses were all excommunicated. Martin Harris in December, and then just months later, Oliver Cowdery and David Whitmore were excommunicated on the same day. Martin Harris and Kirtland were married to Caroline, and they had 4 children. He was rebaptized in 1842, and in 1856 his wife and kids decided to go back to Utah, but he refused. He later said, "I never did leave the church left me," referring to Brigham Young, his family, and everyone else going to Utah. Martin Harris stayed in Kirtland and acted as a self-appointed guide to the Kirtland Temple. Anytime visitors came over, he'd give them a tour, and he bore witness of the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. It was in 1870 that Brigham Young sent him a warm invitation to join him and his family in Utah. Martin agreed, and he made the trip. He was given the opportunity to speak twice to the audiences in the tabernacle. "It is not mere belief, but a matter of knowledge. I saw the plates and the inscriptions thereon. I saw the angel, and he showed them unto me." In the closing days of his life, Martin Harris declared, "I tell you of these things that you may tell others, that what I have said is true, and I dare not deny it. I heard the voice of God commanding me to testify to the same." Martin Harris died in Utah at age 92. He'll forever be known as Martin Harris, the man who knew. Oliver became an attorney and moved to Ohio. He still interacted with church members, and those who did interact with them said that his heart was still with his old friends. In fact, Joseph received a letter from him just hours before being killed in Carthage jail. He moved to Wisconsin hoping a change in climate would help his health. He spoke at a conference in Iowa and pledged his support to the Quorum of the 12. Just days after that, the High Council voted to readmit Oliver back into full fellowship. Orson Hyde of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles rebaptized, reconfirmed, and reordained Oliver back into the church. Oliver made plans to reunite with the saints in Utah, but his health continued to decline, and he passed away in 1850 before he could make the trip. On his deathbed, he said, "I want you to remember what I say unto you. I am a dying man, and what would it profit one to tell you a lie? I know that this Book of Mormon was translated by the gift and power of God. My eyes saw, my ears heard, and my understanding was touched. And I know that whereof I testified is true. It was no dream, no vain imaginations of the mind. it was real. There by his deathbed was David Whitmore. Oliver turned to him and said, "Brother David, be true to your testimony to the Book of Mormon." David Whitmore left Far West and settled in Richmond, Missouri, where he spent the remainder of his life. Even though David was opposed to centralized authority, excommunicated member William McMillan enlisted David and his relatives to reorganize the church, with David as president in 1847. But they soon confessed that the organization was not in accordance with the order of the gospel church. David Whitmore lived outside the church for nearly 50 years following his excommunication, never to return, but never to deny his testimony. As the last surviving witness, he was often interviewed and was often misquoted. To one man who claimed that David had recounted his testimony, he declared that he may understand me now, if he did not then, and that the world may know the truth. I wish now, standing as it were in the very sunset of life and in the fear of God, once for all to make this public statement, that I have never at any time denied that testimony or any part thereof, which has so long since been published with that book as one of the 3 witnesses. 3 days before David died, in January of 1888, called his family and his doctor to his bedside. "Doctor, do you consider that I'm in the right mind?" he asked. His doctor replied, "Yes, you are in the right mind." Then David turned to his family and said, "I want to give you my dying testimony. You must be faithful in Christ. I want to say to you all that the Bible and the record of the Nephites, the Book of Mormon, are true. So you can say that you have heard me bear my testimony on my deathbed." Doing God's work doesn't mean you never fell. It means you rise again. To the end of their lives, periods ranging between 12 to 50 years after their excommunications. None of these witnesses deviated from his published testimony or said anything to cast a shadow on his truthfulness. Today, it's our turn. As surely as God sent the angel Moroni to Oliver Cowdery, David Whitmore, and Martin Harris, he will manifest to us the truth of their testimony and the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon through the power of the Holy Ghost. May we be as true to our testimonies of the Book of Mormon as they were to theirs. Then if we fall, may we rise again to be true to our testimony of living prophets and of the divinity of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.